Keyshawn Davis seems to be ruining his career. I don't really know what he's doing, honestly. I feel like Keyshawn, he's a talented fighter. He's honestly one of my favorite fighters to watch. Still is. It's just like, what are you doing with all the extracurriculars, you know, basically committing crimes outside of the ring, and not making weight is one thing, and ultimately not even close to making weight is crazy. You know, if any of you guys really know boxing, you guys know it's not a good look at all to be as active as Keyshawn Davis has been at lightweight, and then suddenly to miss weight by more than 4 pounds is crazy. You know, Keyshawn basically came in there as a 140 pounder. Like, that's unacceptable as a lightweight defending his title for the very first time. Like, that's a little bit disrespectful to the sport, you know, in my opinion. It's just like, why miss weight when I think he can make it? You know, it's all about the diet. There's some behind the scenes stuff that makes me question whether or not he's really, you know, locked in with the diet. And I'm not saying that he's not in good shape, because ultimately all these boxers, when they're in training camp in general, they're going to look like they're in good shape. But Keyshawn, he has to tighten some things up to make sure this never happens again, because everybody has a moment like this. You know, I don't want people to make it seem like this isn't, you know, something that he can come back from. I'm not saying that, but to add on and add insult to injury, you know, you come in to watch your brother gets outworked, he loses a fight, and then you go backstage and jump somebody. Like, what are you doing? You know, at the end of the day, it's like, Keyshawn, he's a tremendous talent in the sport of boxing, and I understand sometimes you have to be a little crazy to ultimately perform in there, and all boxers, you know, they got a screw loose or two. You know, that's what everybody always says, but there are no excuses for this kind of behavior, and I just think that Keyshawn can't let anything like this ever happen again, because it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to his DB3 brand, you know, for his brothers, as a family. Like, it's not a good look. You know, as a champion, you know, or at least as a former champion, it's really not a good look. So I always expected him to eventually move up to 140, but this was way faster, you know, than I thought he would have moved up to 140. You know, Keyshawn, still, you know, I don't want to bash him too much now, because I still think that he's a tremendous talent. I think he's one of my favorite fighters to watch, but it just sucked to watch him, you know, make all these mistakes in such a short period of time. You know, you blow weight, you miss weight, and then you go in there, the arena on fight night, you know, you basically talk all this trash to Abdullah Mason, and you say how he doesn't want to fight, this and that, and then you go in there, you're unprofessional by not making weight. That's the first thing. And then you basically hand Abdullah Mason the keys to the car and let him sit in the front seat and drive it, because he was the main event now. You know, it's not even your brother, obviously, because he's not a big enough name, so they put Abdullah Mason in place of you. They replaced you with Mason. You know, that should really upset you if you're Keyshawn Davis. And then not only that, but to go backstage and mess with Nair Albright the way that he did, and get in his face and ultimately headbutt him. Like, what are you doing at the end of the day? Like, it doesn't make you look tough. It doesn't make you look cool. You're not, like, defending your brothers. Like, your brother lost in a fight, in a contracted fight. You know, what are you doing going backstage and doing all this stuff and being a tough guy in the locker room? Like, be a professional, be a man about things, do things the right way, and you'll continue to grow as a fighter and as a person. But, like, Keyshawn, you know, he's too talented to be doing stuff like this. It looks bad. It's a silly look. You know, Keyshawn definitely has to fix this and make sure it never happens again, because it's just, like I said, this doesn't look good for Keyshawn Davis, because now people are going to worry about whether or not he's going to make weight. He's already, you know, seen as unprofessional because he missed weight significantly, and, you know, maybe he can't make the weight. Maybe it's time to move up to 140, and that's what he is going to do regardless. But this definitely wasn't a good showing to see him, you know, with all the shenanigans and everything that he did backstage, to, like, physically, you know, hit somebody or touch somebody backstage when it's not a fight, and you're not even fighting on that night. And he kind of had a moment where he's, like, trying to make it about himself, and that's just the one thing I really didn't like to see from Keyshawn Davis. But it is what it is. You know, he tried to make the night about him. He tried to steal the show by causing chaos backstage, but that wasn't the way to get the people's attention. The way to get the people's attention is to go in there and make weight and not try to be like Ryan Garcia, because you're not Ryan Garcia, and obviously De Los Santos isn't Devin Haney. De Los Santos made the right decision, and then Keyshawn thought that, you know, they'd be able to throw money at the problem, but Edwin De Los Santos was smart enough and intelligent enough to say, nah, I'm not you know, dealing with any of this, because this is dangerous. This is the sport of boxing. There are rules. You know, you can't just break them just because you're the champion for one fight. And, you know, Keyshawn lost his title as a result. So it is what it is. You know, Keyshawn has to go back to the drawing board, figure things out, and solve this you know, problem that he's having, where, you know, he has to find what weight class he wants to stay out immediately. Because if he goes up to 140 and finds out, you know, he's not as strong, or the people hit too hard at 140, that could be a problem as well. But we'll see what happens. Keyshawn Davis, obviously, you know, not having the best weekend at all, and just not a good look for him within the sport of boxing. But let me know in the comments what you guys think about Keyshawn Davis and the trajectory of his career. But I just feel like this whole weekend was a step in the wrong direction, and he's too good to be doing this kind of stuff. It's just a bad look. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. Thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next Nabs boxing video. Peace.